Eadred was born in 923, the son of King Edward the Elder and his third wife, Eadgifu of Kent. He was born into the House of Wessex, a royal dynasty that had ruled over much of southern England since the late 9th century. Eadred's father, Edward, was a successful warrior king who had helped to defeat the Vikings and had established a strong and centralized monarchy in England. Eadred was the grandson of King Alfred the Great, one of the most celebrated figures in English history. Alfred had been a warrior king who had successfully resisted Viking invasions in the late 9th century and had established a strong kingdom of Wessex. Eadred became King of England in 946, following the death of his older brother, King Edmund. Edmund is thought to have been killed in a brawl with a notorious outlaw named Leofor, leaving the throne vacant. Eadred was chosen as his successor by the Witan, an assembly of leading nobles and bishops who had the power to elect the king. Eadred faced rebellion from his cousin, Eadwig, who claimed the throne for himself. However, Eadred was ultimately successful in defeating Eadwig and solidifying his own rule. Eadwig was forced to flee to the north of England, where he continued to plot against Eadred. During his reign, Eadred continued the policies of his predecessors in consolidating the power of the monarchy and extending its control over the various Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. This involved a combination of military campaigns, diplomacy, and the granting of charters to towns and cities. Eadred was determined to establish a strong and centralized government in England. Eadred was a devout Christian and was known for his patronage of the church. He oversaw the construction of several new churches and monasteries, and he was a generous benefactor of religious institutions. In 948, Eadred launched a military campaign against the Danes in the north of England, which resulted in the submission of the Viking rulers of York. The Danes had been a persistent threat to England for many years, and Eadred was determined to establish his authority over them. The submission of the Viking rulers of York was a significant victory for Eadred, and it helped to consolidate his position in the north of England. In 954, Eadred successfully led an army against the Welsh, who had been raiding English territories. He is credited with putting an end to Welsh attacks on the border region. The Welsh had long been a thorn in the side of the English, and Eadred's victory was a significant achievement. Eadred suffered from a chronic illness, which caused him to be bedridden for much of his later years. Despite his illness, Eadred continued to govern England effectively and was known for his fairness and impartiality. He was known for his piety and his concern for the welfare of his subjects. He was also known for his support of the arts, particularly illuminated manuscripts. Eadred was involved in several major ecclesiastical disputes during his reign. One of the most significant was a dispute with Archbishop Odo of Canterbury, who was accused of financial impropriety. Eadred took a strong stance against Odo, and eventually forced him to resign from his position. This set a precedent for the king's ability to exert control over the church. Eadred's reign was marked by several important legal reforms. He issued a number of charters that granted greater legal rights and protections to the inhabitants of various towns and cities. He also promulgated a new law code, known as the Laws of Eadred, which helped to standardize legal practice and clarify the rights and obligations of various groups in society. Eadred was known for his generosity and his patronage of the arts. Eadred faced several rebellions during his reign. The most significant of these was a rebellion led by Eric Bloodaxe, a former Viking king of York who had been expelled from England by Eadred's forces. Eric returned to England in 948 and attempted to regain his throne, but was ultimately defeated by Eadred's forces. Eric was killed in the battle, and his death marked the end of Viking rule in York. Eadred was succeeded by his nephew, Eadwig, who had previously rebelled against him. Eadred died on November 23, 955, and was buried at Winchester Cathedral. Eadred's reign marked a period of stability and consolidation in England, following the turmoil of the preceding decades. His reign saw the continued expansion of royal authority and the growth of a centralized government. Eadred's reign also saw the beginnings of a movement towards monastic reform, which would later be championed by his successor, King Eadred.